Hello, everyone. Welcome into the East Alabama Works video podcast. I'm Carl Brady, the Workforce Program Manager for East Alabama Works. As you know, East Alabama Works is the regional workforce development agency, and we work throughout the 7-county East Alabama region, working with employers and companies around the area to help them find qualified and well-trained employees. And we also work with the training organizations and the schools and the CTE centers to make sure their training is what the employees or employers in the region need. And we also talk about a lot of different things that are involved in the workforce. One of the big things recently is opioid addiction. We can talk about that. And also with the COVID-19 pandemic that's been going on. So we have a guest joining us today, Mr. John Garlick. John, welcome to the East Alabama Works video podcast.
Thanks, Carl. I'm glad to be here.
Well, John, give us a little bit of your background. Most people are going to recognize the name from Calhoun County's Most Wanted or from your work with the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office. But so talk about that and what you're doing now, and then we'll get into our main topics for the day.
Certainly. So, yeah, I've got a kind of a varied career. My first career was in corporate accounting. I was a chief financial officer at a local manufacturing company, then was CFO for a year at McWane Center in Birmingham, and then decided I should get a master's in counseling. That led to working with Family Links, which led to working with the Sheriff's Office, and Sheriff Emerson hired me as jail administrator and then patrol deputy, and eventually I became the first mental health officer in Calhoun County in 2007. And we did some great work with that. And then I ended my career at the Sheriff's Office in 2019 as Chief Deputy under Sheriff Matthew Wade. And so my retirement plan was always to hang my shingle up as a consultant and a counselor. I have this nice license to practice counseling. So I hung my shingle up last year in September, and have been doing counseling and some consulting. And I teach adjunct at JSU in the counseling education department, and so I do some trainings at the law enforcement academies and a bunch of other stuff. But yes, so I'm also running Family Link Success Academy as a consultant, and so we're teaching that program works with kids that are in the juvenile justice system, and it's an alternative education environment as opposed to them going into custody at Coosa Valley. They come to our classes, and we're working with your folks to get some job training in for these kids so that they can get some work orientation and probably some job skills training. And so I'm looking forward to that. It's the first time we've started that. So yeah, that's me.
That's you. Well, I think that is going to be a good program there. I'm looking forward to seeing that come to fruition and then to start coming about more and more. But let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the pandemic from your point of view as a counselor, and all of the different mental health aspects of the pandemic. We've got anxiety, we've got fear and worry and loneliness and depression and all of these things that we're seeing in people, because in some cases, people, especially some of our elderly people, have been isolated since March. Talk about some of the general things that you're seeing and that you know about this from the pandemic.
Certainly, it's been just a really tough year emotionally and psychologically for everybody. And you have some folks that have just general work-life anxiety, nothing unusual. Their stress bucket is, halfway full at the end of the day, and they manage their lives really well. And then now we come into 2020 and we're asking them to stay at home, and we're instilling in them social distancing and wearing a mask and the uncertainty of COVID. And as you say, the loneliness, and that's just enough anxiety to fill up that stress bucket to overflowing. And people have been having all kinds of depression and anxiety. Relationships are taxed because now you may love your spouse, but now you're home with them 24/7. There's no break, and everybody's on edge. So there's been couples problems. If you've got, people are different. You got introverts and extroverts, and introverts recharge by being alone, and they like being alone. So in that aspect, this is okay, but they also like to be around other people. But if you're an extrovert, you recharge by being with people. And if you're no longer going to your office or going into work and socializing, you're becoming drained and depressed. And so, yeah, this has been this whole environment since March really has been devastating for a lot of folks. And that take into consideration the folks that are in nursing homes or in continuing care facilities who are older and isolated. They can't see their families. And then the excruciating tragedy of losing a loved one and not being there when they pass.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible. So yeah, it's having a really severe emotional toll on all of us.
I know in my case in particular, I have parents who are in their 70s. My father is in poor health. And other than to go to doctor's visits, they don't leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
We do and go and go visit with them and make sure we spend time with them. And early on, it was on the front porch, everybody separated in rocking chairs, distanced apart. But I can imagine that for somebody who relies on the ability to get out into public, to make those human connections, not being able to do that has just probably been, I would assume, terrible experience for some people.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. You know, my mother's 96 and she's in a care facility in Burlington, Vermont, very close to my sister. But I can't go visit her. Vermont requires that because I'm coming from Alabama, I'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks, either before or after. And the facility itself is reluctant to have visitors even still. So um, it's devastating. People are really uneasy, and it doesn't take much in our modern society to be left with a lot of angst. I mean, you even compile onto that the amount of time you now have to sit at home and get on social media, whatever your favorite social media
Right.
is. And I have never seen a more angering, more angst producing form of communication than
Yes.
social media. And I haven't seen anything positive come out of that environment, certainly this year at all. And it's driving people to do all kinds of things. And,
I
it's
made
good
the
for my
observation.
business.
I made the observation with some friends the other day that I've noticed even driving in the community, people are starting to act in their cars the way they act on Facebook. And even driving has become more difficult simply because of that Facebook attitude is starting to bleed over into other areas of our lives. Things, there was a time when you say things on Facebook and get away with it because there are no personal repercussions really, but that say things that you wouldn't say to somebody face to face. Well, now they're saying them face to face and they don't care. you
Yeah,
know
the whole boundary, our society and our level of civilness has disappeared, thanks to all of that social media, because you can sit there and type something and whatever the repercussions are, it's just words on a page and you can get mad and say whatever you want. And I watch people who would never treat people in person and say things to people in person than they do what they do on Facebook. They say terrible things, and they repost these insulting memes that they would never confront somebody face to face like that. And what you're observing is, as we spend more time working in this virtual environment and dropping those boundaries of civility, now when we go out in the real world, we're more in tune to being less civil. And yes, that's going to bleed through to the street, if you will. And I don't see this ending well.
No. And there's Netflix has a new documentary out about social media and the way we are being manipulated by the social media companies, and it's some amazing information on there if you haven't had a chance to see that.
Oh yeah, years ago, back in the 60s, there was a book written called "The Media is the Message," I can't remember who the author was, but I read it in high school, and it was all about it. It doesn't matter kind of what media you're talking about. Um, it is just whatever's coming across the media is what's becoming the message, and it's self-fulfilling. And it's just, I mean, we're watching that happen right now. It's
We certainly
ridiculous.
are. Well, back to the pandemic. In the early days of the pandemic, it's lasted so long now we can say that the early days. The emotions were fear and anxiety, and those emotions of fear and anxiety seem to have transferred now into frustration and anger because it's lasted so long. Talk about how that process happens.
Well, certainly. So it's almost like the grieving process. So you're told to lock down, you're told not to go to work, and you become depressed with that and sad. And then as it drags on, you become angrier and angrier, as you would in any kind of grief process. And then you do some bargaining. Well, if I can go do this, why can't I go do that? And then eventually, once the anger goes away, you end up with acceptance. And I suppose if this goes on long enough, we'll accept our situation as being whatever it is or whatever it becomes. But it's a natural progression of grieving for what was and having to adapt to, God, I hate to say the new normal, but having to adapt to the new environment that we're going to be in. And of course, the unknown is terrible. We have no idea when or how this will end. And you pile onto that all of this social media distrust we now have in our government and in any authority. I can't think of an authority at all that people are sitting back going, oh yeah, I'm willing to turn my faith and trust over to this agency or this organization. I think everybody's skeptical and fearful and angry, and our nation's mental health is really poor. And there's some things we can do to kind of abate that, but you have to first recognize that you're in control of yourself and your own emotions, and you can't allow somebody else to try and manipulate that.
Mm-hmm. You think that mistrust and the skepticism is why some people are just so adamantly opposed to distancing and wearing a face mask, those kind of things?
Sure, I think part of that is our American psyche. We as a culture, if you can say that America has a culture, is people that don't really like to be told what to do, but left up to them to say, look, if there's some things I need to make a choice to keep myself healthy, then give me that ability to make my choice rather than telling me I have to do something. And of course, when you start mandating things like that, it's a reminder that this is really scarier than we thought it was. And so, yeah, I'm going to resist that. If I'm just naturally inclined, my fear reaction is going to be to resist. And then people criticize you for that resisting, and now you become angrier, and it's this terrible cycle. And now it's become this division where you've got people that are, the mask thing. I'm willing to wear a mask wherever I need to go. Then you got people who are like, no, I'm never going to do that. You can't make me.
Yeah.
And then you've got the happy mediums who, yeah, I'll wear it to the store and do what I need to, but when I'm outside, it's clear and fresh. And then the other side, you got people driving in their car all by themselves with a mask on. Mm-hmm. And who knows?
and through social media and other media, we're also seeing where some of those rules don't always seem to be, or those suggestions are not always applied equally across everyone. You have a mom being arrested in the stands of a football game for not wearing a mask, while there were plenty of other people around on the field and that weren't wearing a mask either. But this one woman was appeared to have been singled out. So people also they like to have a sense of fairness, I think, and they don't always feel like some of these orders are fair.
Yeah, and I think throughout social media, the message this year is that nothing is fair. Mm-hmm. Everybody is being treated unequally. Nothing is fair. You can't trust anybody. And we keep seeing these images that reinforce that. So we are placing our population in a state of fear and anger and distrust. And that's a terrible place to be personally, and it's really a scary place to be as a society.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the wearing of masks has had any kind of effect on people and their interaction? And I say that because to me, it causes communication problems because I have a hearing problem. And I rely, even though I wear hearing aids, I rely a lot on lip reading, facial expressions, and things like that to help me in my communication with people. Well, now with half their face covered up, I'm having a really difficult time myself communicating with people. So I find myself just trying not to communicate if I don't have to.
Right. I think it is a natural reminder that we need to be isolating. And I think you're right. You no longer can communicate the way we should communicate. We're used to talking to each other, looking at each other. The whole face has an expression. Your whole body, in fact, is a communication method. And when you block off the whole lower half of your face, you're not getting the full impact of that communication. And I think it's just a reminder that, well, I shouldn't be talking anymore. And I think you see it in the grocery store. There's very little of that greeting and communicating. I used to go to the grocery store, people would walk up to me, we'd chit chat for a little bit, and none of that's happening. Everybody's just going in and getting their groceries and leaving, and there's very little communication. And we are learning to isolate ourselves from our neighbors. And again, that's a terrible thing too. And we see it in counseling. The telemed version of counseling has become very popular because people are stuck in their house and they don't want to get out. So to keep the counseling profession going, we've opened up the ability to do just what we're doing here, is have a communication over the screen. And I personally don't like to operate that way, because in the counseling communication area, there's this, I gain a lot by being able to see your whole body in my office. I gain a lot by being in the same room with you and kind of sensing your emotions and sensing your vibe. And, we communicate subconsciously a lot when you're in presence with somebody, and that builds rapport, and it builds trust, and it helps communicate where you are for the therapist. And I find that there's a huge disconnect when you're just communicating over the screen, that I can see your face, but I can't really get a sense of what you're thinking and feeling so much unless you tell me. So it's really challenging, and I personally don't like to do it. So thankfully I've got clients who don't like to do it either, and they come to the office and it all
Rather
works
come
out.
to the office.
Yeah. So oh my. But yeah, I think we're learning as a society how to isolate, and that's not good.
It's not a good thing. Not a good thing. Now, we're also seeing statistics that instances of drug abuse and alcohol abuse and things like that are on the rise because of all these things. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. You're left home alone with all kinds of emotions that maybe you were working well just to handle before this, and now it's overwhelming. So maybe you were a 2 or 3 time a week cocktail hour kind of person. Well, now that's become every day, and it's gone from 1 drink to 2 drinks. Or maybe you were a drug abuser and you were clean and sober, but now you're feeling the old angst and you start to use again, or you're using more. But yes, it is. People are overeating. I just read an article where the incidence of gastric bypass is going up. People are wanting gastric bypasses because they've been overeating during COVID. So all of these things that help comfort you, drugs, alcohol, and food, are what you're turning to reduce your angst, which is kind of, that's the easy way to reduce angst. That's you just putting stuff in you rather than working with your own emotions and trying to handle your emotions properly. So yeah, all of that's going up, and it's going to have a tragic out. Suicides are up. Recidivism from drug abuse is up. People are suffering, and I'm afraid they're going to continue to suffer until we come to whatever the end of this looks like, whether it's a vaccine or society has to stabilize. And it's almost as if society has to stabilize not just on the COVID, but on the politics and on the social media. Yes. There's so much going on that unless you really take charge of what you're taking in, you're going to be lost in this huge national angst.
And this, since we want to talk about workforce development as well, since we are East Alabama Works, this is having an effect in the workplace, because even though our unemployment numbers are still high in some areas, our industries in the East Alabama region are hiring and begging for workers. They still can't find enough people willing to come to work. And part of that problem is fear of coming back to work, fear of the pandemic. And then we are, prior to the pandemic, we already had issues with drug abuse and finding people who could pass drug tests in their pre-employment testing, but that's become a bigger issue now. So address some of these workplace issues. All of these kind of things are bleeding over into the workplace and causing work problems as well.
Oh yeah, of course. So people tend to, when they're overwhelmed, follow the path of least resistance. So, if your business was shut down and you were forced to be at home receiving the stimulus and unemployment, then you found that this was a pretty decent path of least resistance. I can tolerate this, and I can just contain myself. And then when it's time to go back to work, it's overwhelming to even think about leaving this comfort area and to go back into the work environment. So if you can manage to keep yourself at home financially, that's going to be your easiest path, is to just stay at home. And then, of course, you bring that angst into the work environment. So when you go back to work, you're now socializing with people in your work environment, standing side by side, running a machine, and all that angst comes to work, and you're overwhelmed enough that you couldn't cope with it really well to begin with, and now you're losing your temper, and you're like, you know what, I don't need to work here anymore. You mean I just can't get here on time, and some workplaces are very strict about how you do your job and when you do your job, and people are very sensitive. So yeah, the workforce has depleted just by virtue of I'm terrified to go out, or now I've become more of an abuser, substance abuser, so I can't get out, to I just don't want to work. And we were suffering from a lack of skilled labor before, and now it's just, yeah, it's a huge problem. And I think we're seeing a lot of companies that are paying more attention to the emotional well-being of their employees, and doing a better job with human resources and referring for therapy and counseling if it's needed. And that certainly helps. And it's something that we need to continue doing. But everybody is stressed, and that translates right into the workforce. And it's tough. Yeah.
I think also that we're going to see some additional issues and problems coming up soon with, for example, someone who was making $12 or $13 an hour, they go on unemployment, they get that extra $600, which for a few weeks they're suddenly making $22 an hour. Mm-hmm. Then it dropped down to the $300 supplement, which was about $15 an hour. And now that's run out, and we're going to have a lot of people who have done maybe a forbearance on their mortgage, or a delay on their mortgage payments, or on their power company payments. And suddenly that money is going to come, in some cases, it's going to come due as a lump sum, and not just added to the end of the mortgage or whatever. And so we would all be guilty of it. If I suddenly started making a whole bunch of extra money for a few weeks, I would probably spend it, and maybe catch up some things, live high on the hog, and then all of a sudden I'd be in a bad spot when that ended. And I think we're getting ready to see that as well, where some folks are going to have problems paying their mortgages, problems paying their power bills, and things like that, because of the drastic difference in the amount of money coming in.
Oh, I agree. I think the people that are getting their PhD in economics are going to have lots of research that they can do on this. You've got supply and demand when it comes to labor, so just like you said, somebody's making $22 an hour not working, and then they need to go back to work, they're going to demand a higher wage than they were getting. Companies are going to say, well, I can no longer hire people at $12 an hour, and they're going to have to bump their wages up to encourage people to come back. And that's going to, of course, have an impact on the overall economy. And then people, like you said, going into bankruptcy, losing their houses, you're going to have, that's going to be a huge problem. And I'm not sure where the fix is for that. And I'm not enough of an economist to know where that's going to lead, whether that leads to another huge recession or depression, or whether there's a mechanism for, helping landlords get money for their back rent and keeping people in housing. Or it's a mess. And I think it's interesting, we don't, for whatever reason, we can't go back to 1918, 1919 and fully understand, maybe somebody can, but fully understand what society was doing during the Spanish flu. Because there was, I think I remember 800,000 Americans died in 9 months. I think sometimes the papers report less than that, but I remember reading it was 600 to 800,000 deaths in the United States in 9 months. And mostly in the big cities, as we're seeing now. But what happened to the economy? We all know what the 20s looked like, the roaring 20s, people were making a lot of money. And then, of course, 1929, boom, we hit the skids. And I don't know if that was a result of stuff that happened after the flu. We just don't, I don't know. Somebody, I'm sure, can compare the two and tell us where we're going. But I think you're right. There's a lot more coming that is going to create a lot of problems for a lot of people. And, hopefully we'll all survive somehow. I've got to have faith that we'll figure out a way through this. What the world will look like, what our country and our workforce will look like moving forward. Maybe this is what we need to re-engineer our high school education training programs and how we assess people. Maybe this is a great shaking out in what we pay labor and how we train labor on site. Who knows where this will go. I would like to think, and I'm fairly certain that no matter how this goes, when it's all said and done, some things will be tremendously better about our society.
We always do seem to come out on the other end of a crisis.
We will look at and go, yeah. And then some things we'll look at and go, well, that's gone forever, and that's sad, whatever that may be. But and I do think people are going to be having to manage their emotion better for the next year and a half, probably.
And one of the things that we do at East Alabama Works that I'm seeing that we need to be doing more of currently is awareness of some issues and some things. There was a workforce survey that we got the results of just last week. And it was a survey of people who are not working, not currently engaged in the workforce. And I think it was 32% said they didn't have a job and weren't engaged in the workforce because there were just no jobs available. And that's a total misconception, because everywhere you look, people are hiring, from the food service industry to sales and retail, to especially in industry and the industrial things that we deal with a lot. There are a lot of jobs available out there. You just got to go get them. They're not going to come to you. They're going to go get them. But we need to make sure that people don't think that there's not enough jobs available out there and use that as the reason for not going to work. So we need to help spread awareness of that more of those jobs are available out there.
And I think you're going to see a shift in that as well. In the old days it was, I needed a job, so I'm going to look at the want ads or look online, or I'm going to knock on people's door and I'm going to go find a job. And I think with our society becoming ever more isolated and stuck at home, people are they're maybe trying to find jobs on like Indeed or something, but it's overwhelming because they're not finding what they're looking for. They're not gaining enough knowledge to know what's out there. And I think one of the things you'll see shifting is out of necessity, manufacturers or businesses looking to hire people are actually going to have to go knock on people's doors, so to speak, and say,
Mhm.
we've got these jobs available. Now, how they do that with job fairs, of course, we've been having those, hitting the high schools, hitting the colleges. But there needs to be another way to reach people where they are, which is isolated. And how you do that, I really think businesses are going to literally have to knock on people's computer door and say, we
Mhm.
do have jobs. We absolutely have jobs. Let's run ads on TV or whatever people watch now and say, these are the jobs we have at our business. Please call us. Let us know how we can reach you and show you what programs we have. And they're going to have to offer
Yeah,
good training programs. It's going to shift.
yeah, that's something that we're already looking at because I'm consulting with a couple of different companies already on how to how to recruit. And instead of just, for so many years the companies were just here, people came to them looking for jobs, and now the companies are having to actively recruit new employees. They've got to talk about how much money they pay, talk about what great benefits they have, talk about how many vacation days and personal days you get, what kind of tuition repayment reimbursement programs you have, all of those things. Uh, Nowadays, the you would go to the company and the company would scrutinize you as to whether you'd be a good employee or not. Well, now employees are going and they're scrutinizing the companies. Well, do I want to work here, or do I want to work here, or do I want to work here? And that's a new position for the companies to be in. So that's we're working with them on recruiting strategies and those kind of things lately.
Yeah, I think start in ninth grade, if not sooner, and start going to schools and saying, look, isn't this a great place to work? And
Mhm.
when you get out of high school, if you don't have necessary skills and stuff, we'll train you. And kind of like what we do in the military, you can graduate high school, go to ROTC, or you can go right to boot camp, and you'll have skills by the time you finish your hitch.
Mhm.
Companies are going to maybe have to start doing that, saying, look, you sign on with us after 2 years, you can go work for anybody else, but we'll give you all these skills and training, and look at the benefits you have working for us. But yeah, I think they're going to have to tap into the ninth graders and start winning them over, which
Yeah.
would be good. I mean, it's good for the company to recruit employees, but it's also good for the student to be aware of what's out there. You're in high school trying to figure out what you want to do. Do I want to go to college? What do I want to study? Do I want to just get a job? They don't know what's out there. And even the high school counselors are they're better informed than the students, but they're not out there trying to recruit for business. They're just kind of throwing options. And I think it's important we get into the schools with businesses and,
Mhm.
and show them what's going on in a big way. I mean, a really big
Absolutely.
way, not like what we've been doing, but in a much bigger way.
Absolutely. Well, we've had a very nice, free-flowing conversation here about a lot of different things, but I want to go back to our original topic, and that's the stress and anxiety and the fear, the things like that of the pandemic. And from your counselor's perspective, give us a couple of points of advice for somebody who's struggling with some anxiety or with fear of getting back out into society.
Absolutely. So the most important thing is to recognize that you are the only person that you can control. So when you're looking at other people and trying to manipulate them or trying to manipulate society, you're looking at Facebook and going, I know what the solution to this problem is. Well, okay, but you're not in a position to do anything about it. So recognize what you can control, which is yourself. There's some really good things you can do to tune up your body for stress and anxiety. One of the things is to eat properly, eat healthy food. If you're not taking supplemental vitamins, you absolutely need to be. So you need a good multivitamin, you need a good time released 500 to 1,000 milligram vitamin C, you need an all B that usually comes with C, because vitamin B is what your body consumes when you're under stress. So you need to supplement that with all the Bs that are available. Those three vitamins right there alone will help your body have what it needs to work with that stress. The other thing you can do for your body is feed it lots and lots of water. Water is essential. If you've ever been a little bit dehydrated and kind of had a brain fog and you drink some water, you'll instantly feel relief. So when your mind is spinning with all of these thoughts that are just recurring and recurring, if you drink some water, It'll give you some fluid to help calm your brain, and it slows your breathing down. The other thing we can do is when you feel your anxiety level rising, then it's time to start breathing. We teach combat breathing in the military, and it's called combat breathing because it reduces your stress and anxiety so that you can do your job with a clearer head. It's a very simple process of breathing in slowly for a count of 4, holding it for 1 to 4, and then letting it out slowly for a count of 4. And you just keep feeding your body air, and you'll feel yourself relax tremendously. It really works well. I had to use it when I had an MRI done a few months ago. I was losing it, and I said, okay, I got to breathe, and it got me through. But it really works. So vitamins, water, breathing are essential for just controlling the physiology around anxiety and stress. The other thing you can do is go outside, be in the fresh air, be around nature. Outside you can take your mask off, you can breathe in the fresh air. And if it's a sunny day, not like today, but if it's a sunny day, look at the blue sky, not the clouds, definitely not the sun, don't look at the sun, but look at the blue sky and just stare at it for 20 seconds. Just breathe and look at the blue sky for 20 seconds. And that has an effect of resetting some brain chemistry. It's just the blue sky, it's a gift. So look at the blue sky, and it will reset some things for you. And then pay attention to what you tell yourself. If you tell yourself the world is coming to an end, then you will react like the world is coming to an end. If you tell yourself, I can handle this, I'm going to survive this, everything's going to be okay, it's not as bad as it seems, I just need to have a plan and work my plan one day at a time, one step at a time, whatever it is that you tell yourself to keep moving forward. And that helps reduce the traumatic, catastrophic self-talk that we see every day on social media. And you've just got to tell yourself what reality is. And remember that sometimes you have to go one day at a time. Sometimes you have to go 1 foot in front of the other. And once you've done that, then you move a little faster. Don't project, and eat right, drink water, take vitamins.
I like the going outside, being in nature, and that I like to find a sunny spot and absorb some sunshine myself. The sunshine always helps me feel better.
Well, the secret of life is more important now than it has ever been. And I know the secret of life if you'd like me to share it with you.
Absolutely.
It's very simple. You need 3 things to be happy in life. You need someone to love, you need something to do, and you need something to look forward to. And that's the hope part of it. We're pretty good at having somebody to love. If you're working, you've got something to do, or maybe you have a hobby. But we tend to not give ourselves that something to look forward to. We tend not to plan our weekends off. Well, what are you going to do this weekend? I don't know. Maybe I'll just sleep late. This is where you give yourself something to look forward to. I'm going hiking. I'm going sailing. I'm going doing. So you got something to look forward to every day. You're like, you know what? Today's kind of a bad day, but Saturday, I'm going to go do this. And that's the secret, is those 3 things. If you've got those 3 things going on, then you're going to be just fine.
John, I have really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and for giving us that good advice.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, thank you for joining us for the East Alabama Works video podcast. Remember to visit with us online. Go to our website at eastalabamaworks.com.